So
okay, so where did you grow up?
I was born in Encino in 1957, and just recently, after losing dad, found out that a few months into my life, we moved to Socorro. So I've grown up in Socorro.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
Um, and how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I'm the oldest of nine,
Wow.
five
Okay.
boys and four girls.
And then your parents had a bunch of siblings too, right?
My mom is one of 17 kids.
Wow.
Grandma and grandpa had 8 boys and 8 girls of their own, adopted a granddaughter because she was sickly and her mom was a single mother, and they adopted her and raised her too. So, and then
And
dad is one of, if we put all the three different families together, he's one of 10, but he grew up in a household of 6.
did all of those people live around Encino or Socorro?
They all grew up around Encino, and then from there went on to Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Colorado. So,
But when you were growing up, was all that
well,
family,
they
like cousins and
yeah,
aunts and
I had a
uncles
lot,
and
and having both sides of my family, my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family, my grandparents, both sides of the families there in Encino. I had all kinds of relatives in Encino.
okay. And did you all live in town or did you have a ranch or?
Well, both grandparents just had homes in Encino at the time. When I was born, they were all living in Encino. The Rivera side of my grand family had come off the ranches in the 40s, right around 1940. Come from just north of Encino, about 25 miles north of Encino, being on a big ranch there.
So did they originally homestead in that area?
Uh, yes, my great great grandfather, who was my grandma Rivera's grandpa, he actually ended up homesteading there after starting out around Abaco, going to Trinidad, going all the
Oh,
way to Nogales, Arizona, and then coming back to Encino. Coming back to
wow.
he was he was an entrepreneur and not afraid to try anything and stuff. And
Okay, so that's your Rivera, you said?
that would be on the Rivera side, but that would be the Jaramillo side because I have my grandma Rivera was actually her maiden surname was Jaramillo, and then Rivera, my dad's dad, and then my mom's family would be Madrid and Garcia. So those are actually 4 fairly prominent families in that area there.
Mm-hmm.
So
In like Encino area or
in
up by like,
in the whole county of Torrance County, they were all pretty well known.
so do you
My
know why after all that movement he ended up in Encino?
Well, they had all been part of the big ranch that my great great grandpa had, who was an Abeyta, Jesus Maria Abeyta, and he actually ended up selling the ranch to a family from that was starting out there around Encino, and he sold everything that he had to them, and so they moved into town, and that's where they ended up pretty much finishing their lives. The great great grandpa Abeyta was a really big landowner at one time there. He built a real custom house that's very unique to the Trinidad type area. It's a house. It's very unique to Encino, but it's a lot like the houses that are in and around Raton and Trinidad and stuff because of the weathers and stuff. And it's still standing. It's
Oh,
not in
okay.
the best of shape, but it's still standing and
Is it
stuff.
still
So
occupied?
no, it hasn't been lived in, and probably shortly after they left there in the 40s in 1940.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's a rock house and still got a good roof and everything on it. I mean, it would take a little money to fix it and make it livable again, but I was able to see it a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you still have family buried out there on the ranch?
Just to the north of town, just to the north of the ranch there, was another little town called Palma, and my great great grandfather and all his children and everybody all had a deal in building the church and the cemetery that's there.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, my great great grandma, my grandpa Abeyta's wife, and my great grandma Jaramillo, they're buried side by side there, and then two of the youngest of my great grandma's sons are buried there too. They were young when they passed away, and they were buried there and stuff. But yeah, it's
So they built the church in Palma?
in Palma. It's called Palma.
Cool. Do they still have mass there?
No, I haven't been there in a year and a half, and it was about ready to come down.
Oh, shoot.
The north wall was being held up. There's no more north wall. The roof was being held up with some timbers, and it's surrounded by private land, and it's real hard to get access to.
Oh, okay.
So it just makes it hard to do. But yeah, so
okay. So was that the home parish for your family that lived in the area?
Well, that was the church that they all went to from there. It was part of it was a mission church at one time for the church in Rivera, and then for Villanueva. So
was Rivera named for your family?
No, not that we can know of. I'm sure somewhere down the road we have connection to it. But the town of Ribera is RIB, where we are RIV. So.
And what did they ranch out there?
Well,
your great great grandpa.
My great great grandpa at one time had probably over 50,000 head of sheep.
Wow.
And a few cows and everything else, but they had cattle and stuff, but mostly sheep. And then the sheep started. It just got to a point, and sheep were real prevalent in that area there for years and years and years. But there's not very many ranchers with sheep there anymore. There's not a big enough market for sheep anymore.
Yeah, it seems like in some other interviews that I've done, it seems that that's a pretty common story that the Hispano ranchers were very successful in sheep ranching, and that when the Anglo came in, they preferred cattle and kind of moved the market towards cattle.
Right. We know that the Rivera side of the family in Spain were along one of the rivers there, and they were borregueros, which would be sheep. They're sheep herders and stuff. So, yeah. So
what happened in the 40s that they moved off the ranch or something?
I think my great grandma Jaramillo and my great great grandma Abeyta both died a month and a half apart, and they left youngins. My grandma Rivera was the oldest of my grandma Antonia's. My grandma Antonia's being Jaramillo, she was the oldest child, so she was actually helping raise her aunts and a couple of uncles, along with her older aunts and uncles, the older ones in that family, helping them, raise each other. So they were all working and raising each other, because neither of those two men, my great great grandpa and my great grandpa, they never remarried.
That's unusual.
Yeah, really. They never remarried.
Very unusual.
Yeah. And my great grandpa Joe, when they ended up when they moved into Encino, he ended up living with my grandma and grandpa Rivera till he died. Until he died.
What did your family do when they were in Encino? Did they have the store and a bar?
Well, that was my mom's side of the family. The Rivera side, they worked with the different ranchers and everything else, doing cowboying and stuff. And whatever. Grandpa at one time had worked with the schools as maintenance and custodian type for a little while. And then I think he even worked on the railroad for a little while. And my grandpa Garcia, my mom's side of the family, they had a bar, a store, a cafe, and a ranch.
Wow.
And that's how they got 17 kids through life.
Well, and I'm sure having the 17 free workers helps keep those businesses going too, huh?
Well, yeah, and then it was a combination of all of us growing up. We were always over there doing something, coming to help doing something. So,
So where that was in Encino,
hmm
that they had a
and
bar and
the only thing left still standing of the bar and the store and the house is actually the store.
oh, okay.
Yeah, there's pictures of the house or the bar or the store still standing and stuff. But yeah, no,
Oh,
I growing up, I got a chance to help in this bar, the store, sweeping, cleaning, stocking, just whatever, working out, going out on the ranch or doing whatever. So we were busy. I mean, if I wasn't with one set of grandparents, I was at the other grandparents. So, I mean, most of my raising was with my mom's side of the family, but I got to spend a lot of time with my dad's side of the family too, because like I say, they were just down the road. Just we thought for as a little kid, you think 2 blocks away is full long blocks away seems like a long ways, but it's really not, but we would go.
do you
So,
have photos of the bar and the store and everything from their heydays?
there's a few that have come around. I don't have all that many. I
Hmm.
have a couple of them that of me as a little boy standing in front of one of the posts in front of between the store and the house, and what would be the cafe under right by the porch and stuff. But yeah, there's a few. Most most of the pictures that we have are different things and stuff like that. But I do have a couple of pictures that we could do.
So, you grew up speaking Spanish?
Yep.
Everybody, all the family members spoke Spanish?
Well, my grandparents and most of my older uncles and everybody, they all spoke Spanish and everything. They understood and spoke English. Don't that, but Spanish was their first language. And growing up till I got to be a teen, probably I'm going to say outside of junior high, maybe into a little bit in high school, I spoke fluent Spanish, could read and write Spanish, and never have to translate in my mind. Now, if I tried to write you a note in Spanish, it'd take me an hour to get you a one-page legal note to get it done because it doesn't always look right. But I still speak as much of it as I can. Yeah.
And is that because your generation tended to not speak it so much once the older
Well,
ones were
yeah.
gone?
I mean, even my dad and my aunts and uncles will all say, when they got into school, the teachers would frown on them speaking Spanish. They said you have to learn English. You have to learn English, and
Hmm.
they would get in trouble for speaking and stuff. A lot of Spanish and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's just you know times in the world have changed.
Yeah, that's a very common story that
Yeah.
yeah, my dad, same thing. So I never grew up speaking Spanish either,
Well,
myself.
my siblings don't speak. They understand. They speak very very just a few words, but and they don't understand everything either. So where I and as I got older, my grandparents would scold me about you need to be teaching your siblings how to talk in Spanish and stuff. So, but
Oh, okay. Well, that's good that they appreciated it and wanted
they
to.
well, and for years, I mean, getting a chance to know all these great aunts and uncles and everything else. Come Christmas time, that the wife and I would send out Christmas cards to all of them. I always wrote, I had a note in them, and it was always in Spanish. It might take us 10 days to get the Christmas cards done, but we'd get it done, and they appreciated that. You know, I'm down to where I have one of my dad's siblings, his sister, and on my mom's side, she has one brother and 5 sisters left at
Wow.
17. The last couple of years have taken a big toll on our family.
Yeah.
Big
Yeah,
toll.
you're lucky to have that many.
Well, of 17, yeah, really, yeah. And seeing like my mom's baby sister, the baby of the family, she is only 2 years older than me. So I didn't grow up calling her Auntie Annabelle. It's just always Annabelle. But when I talk about her, it's always my Auntie Annabelle. And we're more like she's more like my big sister. So, and we can talk about anything, and we do, and we visit and talk and stuff. So yeah, but that's just the way we grew up. But and everybody in and around Encino, where they know me, and even they have gotten to the point that somebody asked them, "Well, who was that?" Well, that's Marty. That's my cousin. Where we share too many relatives. If we're not actually blood related, we share so many relatives. Instead of trying to tell everybody, try to get the explanation of exactly how, just say, "Well, he's a cousin," So.
So do you know a lot about your genealogy, or you
Yeah.
haven't gotten into it?
No, my sidekick over here, she's the one. I got started looking into it in Ancestry years ago, and then she started and stuff. I can tell you a bunch with the Find a Grave, because I do Find a Grave where she does Ancestry.
Oh, cool.
But we know that we can go back to the 1600s, into the late 1500s and stuff, with the Oñate expedition and the De Vargas expedition. I had families from both sides of the family on those excursions.
Okay, so they were originally in that, because all of my people are all northern New
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, southern Colorado. So I actually don't know very much about those families and it seems like from throughout the years I've just heard there's a real difference between the Rio Arriba and the Rio Abajo.
Right.
And I even asked one time when I first started out, I had it's a dumb question now, but I was asking on one of the Facebook pages, what's the difference between, all the families in southern Colorado versus southern New Mexico versus northern New Mexico? And most of the answers I got were, in northern New Mexico, they root for the uh, Broncos, and in southern New Mexico, they root for the Cowboys.
Right. Well, and
But
that's
really, I guess the real answer is that the La Bajada hill was so treacherous that the folks in the Rio Reba stayed up there, and that
right.
it was a different later settlement that was in the Rio Abajo. But you're saying that your people were in those original settlements, like with De Vargas and everything. So how did they kind of end up more in southern New Mexico? Do you know?
Well, they really didn't. They stayed. Most of my family is still north of me.
Okay.
My dad and some of his first cousins and stuff ended up in Las Cruces and stuff. But we can take the Jaramillo side of the family all the way back to Spain, coming to Mexico City, and then coming up here. Okay. And Cindy will be able is the one. uh Two families of Jaramillos were pretty much the first original Jaramillos in New Mexico. So if you've
Mm.
got any Jaramillo blood in you, you're of one of these two families that came and stuff. And we've been able to find that my side of the Jaramillos is probably the ones that settled in right smack square in and around Chimayo,
Oh, okay.
Santa Fe and Chimayo. And the Madrids was the same way. They came through and went up and ended up in Santa Fe before they started migrating down. And they didn't migrate south, too much south. Uh, the furthest south they really came down to was between Duran and Corona, which is Duran is only 15 miles south of Encino. So from Santa Fe to Galisteo to Encino and Corona, and Duran, and then just not all the way to Corona either, just outside of Corona. So most of my heritage stays north. Has stayed north.
And so were they like working for the railroad? Like that whole area is kind of like,
Well,
I
the
mean, later,
Madrid side.
much later on, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, later on and stuff, but most of them ended up as families. The Jaramillos, my Jaramillos, my great going back that however many generations back, Jose Jaramillo Negrete, he came as a mason and a bricklayer.
Hmm.
Okay, brought his family
From where?
and from Spain to Mexico City to here
Oh, like at what time period?
in the 1650s.
Oh, okay.
1692. Then the 1650s is 1692, somewhere in there, and stuff. So, and we're kind of seeing that the actual adobe brick is not that old, not as old as everybody thinks it is. Mud houses have been around forever, but he may have had something to help create the adobes to work with the natives and stuff after they got settled in enough to start making the adobes instead of just laying mud and on top of things to make walls and stuff. So
yeah, because the actual adobe bricks, that technology came from the Moors in Spain. Is that correct?
It came out of Spain, but it's a combination of being able to, and like I say, we're kind of seeing that he may have had something to do with being able to take his trade and combine it with what was already here and make it become something that has become very, very prevalent and very prominent in this culture here. So.
And that area is around you is known as the Pinto Bean Empire. Is that correct?
Well, if you take New Mexico and take a strip that's probably 80 miles wide, starting at about the Arizona border and just inside, probably 30, 40 miles from the Arizona border, and going all the way over to the Clovis and into the West Texas side along what is Highway 60 here. That's the Pinto Bean. They called it the Pinto Bean Valley. And so it was all dryland farming.
Oh, it was dryland. Wow.
It was all dryland farming. They would actually circles grow crops on a hill and let the water as it came down, as it trickled down, and do that. Because there's still remnants of places out to the east of us here a little bit of where they did some of that too. So, but it's, pinto beans were very, and they still are, still pretty in and around from Mountain Air to Willard and Estancia and Moriarty. You still have a lot of pinto beans growing in this area there.
Yeah, I picked some up at that grocery store in Mountain Air when we were there. I'm excited. I need to figure out where I put those because I need to bust those out so they're nice and fresh. I'm excited. I've heard it's a totally different. I don't think I've had like more fresh beans, and I haven't just gotten like at the store, like you would get. Well, so I've heard it's a totally different experience.
They are. Now, some of the different farmers have a different size bean to others and stuff. So it's just wherever and however. So.
Okay. And then what is your family's connection to Governor Dillon?
Well, being that he was a businessman in Encino, both sides of my family knew him. My grandpa Garcia, well, he had a store. My grandma and grandpa Rivera, well, that was one of the other stores. At one time in Encino, there was 4 little stores.
Wow.
My grandma and grandpa's on this side of the road. On the north side of the road, right directly across, was my grandma Garcia's sister, and her and brother-in-law had the Montoya and Sons store, Governor Dillon's store, and then there was another one over a little further east and stuff. But yeah, and like I say, Governor Dillon, growing up, I didn't know him as Governor Dillon. I just knew him as Mr. Dillon. We always, we would acquire a few cents and stuff and go over to his store to go buy candy and stuff and check out that big old buffalo head that he had on that pole in the middle of the store. And it was a big buffalo head. It was one I do remember, and everybody else, my dad and everybody would come. That was probably one of the largest buffalo heads that they had ever seen.
Wow.
It was a big where he killed it, where he got it, I have no clue for sure, but the cool part was as a little kid, here's a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old. He had a step stool or a little ladder that you could climb up there and you could get right into that buffalo's eyes to look at it, just to see. And I mean, not everybody would do something like that, but he was a pretty cool man.
And so this was quite a bit after he was governor.
Right. He was the governor 20s to the early 30s, 27 to 31. And then he came back into Encino, and he died there in Encino in 1966. And then his wife stayed there till she died. But yeah, he's. I mean, like I say, I didn't realize he was governor till way after he was long gone and stuff. But I do remember him, and just to know the connections and stuff to see. And now that my brother and sister own his house, well, it's even more. It's been a lot more fun trying to find all these things, all these cool things more so about Governor Dillon.
So was the town kind of mixed, or was it like when you were in school, was there mostly Hispano kids, or was it kind of mixed?
It was here in Socorro. It was fairly even with Anglo and Hispanics. In Encino, it was a little more Hispanic than it was Anglo, but there were still quite a few Anglo people, and stuff. Cindy's heard me say this, and I'll tell you. In high school, when I was in high school here in Socorro, because I went to school here, I really never did live in Encino, but I spent a lot of time there. Any free time, I was over there because it was just so much fun for me. But I would tell all my classmates and stuff here, I said, I can't go to Torrance County and go date the girls in Torrance County. Well, why? Well, they might all be related. Some might be related to me. I said, I've got cousins with the last name of Gibsons, and every surname you could find. I might, but in Encino there was three families that I could date those girls, and they said, "Well, why could you date them?" Because they weren't any relation, but we all knew of them. They knew my families, both my families. My families worked with them, worked for them, or whatever. Had done different things, and it was like so. It was kind of fun, kind of cool and stuff, and it's still kind of that way. I mean, I run into people. Did you know that's your cousin? No, but I'm not going to doubt it. And then we get to talking a little bit, and it's like where we might be 2 generations removed, where we find the blood. I'm closer to them because of the connections that their families have made with some of my family connections, and stuff. So we share so many relatives and stuff that it's just easier to say, well, they're just cousins. So.
So what did you do when you were hanging out with your grandparents? Did you learn how to cook, or were you working on the?
Well, yeah, learned how to cook, learned how to work in the store, learned how to make change. That is one of my biggest peeves, I think, of now. You go hand a clerk in a store change, and they can't give you back. They don't know how to count back change. They don't know how to make change unless the machine tells them. Okay. And it's like that was the first thing we had to learn to do, was to be able to make change and count it back to the customer. But we were always stocking and helping Grandma and Grandpa stock the store, the bar. And Cindy will tell you, the pantry and stuff has got to be put away a certain way, because that's just the way I learned. It's just the way I learned. It's a habit that's never going to go away. Labels have to be directly facing, and stuff as you do, but rotation of stock and everything else. But no.
Were there any cuentos that your grandparents would share that you remember?
Oh, my grandpa Rivera was prominent with his cuentos and dichos, and I loved that man for that. One of the most favorite ones that both he and my dad and my other grandpa would use would just be, and it was just a little saying, tan vivo y tan pendejo. So smart and yet so dumb. Somebody would pull something and they could be the most highly educated. And I mean, it's true to this day. It's still the truth. It's not anything. But my grandpa Rivera, there was always something to learn from something he told you. We walked out. I remember being a young boy. We walked outside, not a cloud in the sky. Puts his hand on his hips and he's just looking all around. And I'll tell you in Spanish first, because it sounds so much better in Spanish, then I'll translate it out for you. We turn around and looking at the sky. And I said, Grandpa, ¿qué mira? Grandpa, what do you see? Vaca y agua. it's going to rain. Grandpa, there's not a cloud in the sky. Where's it going to rain? What do you mean it's going to rain? Ay de por ahí, somewhere it's going to rain. Well, but he wanted me to see the sky, how beautiful the sky was that day. And so it was little things like that. Another one that I've used, and I tell people, was as a little boy, I remember going from Encino to Vaughn to go to the store. And from Encino to Vaughn, there's really no trees close to the road. And I had to pee. And I finally told Grandpa, I said, you're going to stop or I'm going to pee my pants. Grandpa, there's not anywhere here. He said, just go over there by the fence. What for? Close your eyes. They can't see you. And it's like, what? Close your eyes. They can't see you. And in Spanish, ciérrate los ojos, no te miran. And it's like, that doesn't make sense, but it does. If you've got your eyes closed, nobody's going to see you. You don't care. Just go do your thing. And it's like, but there was always something to learn from him. And like I say, he would come up with things like that. My grandpa, Joe, I was blessed and privileged and honored the summer before he passed away. He died in 1969. The summer of, he passed away actually February the 14th of 69. So that summer in 68 that I had just turned 11. He was there at the house and I was with my grandma and Grandpa Garcia's. And I told my grandma, I said, I'm going to go check on my grandpa. She said, okay. I went and checked on him. And it was after lunch hour already anyways. He had been doing something, got busy, and he was sitting there at the table, eating a little something. And I knocked on the door and walked in. And he says, you need to get you a plate so you can eat with me. I said, Grandpa already ate. No, you need to eat with me. I don't like to eat alone. Well, he had some little carnitas, some little meat, little pieces of meat, had some red chili, had some beans, and he went to the refrigerator and got some masa for a tortilla. And he didn't roll it. He just put it in his hands and flopped it, okay? Put it on the wood stove, cooked it up, got me a cup of coffee. I ate. We got done. We washed the dishes, put everything away. And then he asked me, he said, how did you like that meat? I said, that was pretty good pork. And he said, it wasn't pork. He told me, he said, it's cuerpespin. It's porcupine.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. And I looked at him. I probably made that same look that you're showing me there. Okay. And I told him, I said, Grandpa, I said, how do you skin a porcupine?
I was going to ask that too.
And he looks at me. He says, you want to learn? Well, of course. He said, you go back to the house, go tell your grandma and get you some clothes that you're going to spend the night with me because I know where there's another one.
Oh.
So guess what? I went to the house and told Grandma that I was going to spend the night with Grandpa because we were going to go look for a porcupine. Grandma like, okay, whatever. I walked back to the house. He didn't have a pickup. He had an old car, 50-something big trunk. So we got a few things together. We had supper that night. We went to bed, got up early before the sun come up. We made breakfast, washed the dishes, put them away, and it was still dark. And we got ready and we left. We went for a ride. He got it and stuff. We rode probably 15 minutes to half an hour from the house. And all this time, I thought we had taken one road from right in town. It wasn't until after I lost my uncle and everything just a few years back that I Googled it up to kind of figure, because I remember driving and we stopped at the base of this hill. We got out and we had a stick that was about the length of a shovel handle, about the same size, had some baling wire in our gloves. And we walked up to the top of this hill, and when we got to the top of the hill, we were looking down right over the ranch headquarters. Well, there's a windmill, there's a dirt tank, there's a steel tank, and on the other side of the steel tank is a big garden area, and there was some cottonwoods there where the garden is. And the house was off to the left of the tank looking at it as we were looking, or to the right of it. And he's looking and he says, see that black thing up there in that number 3 tree? Yeah, that's a porcupine.
Oh my God, a tree.
It was up the tree. So we walked down, got underneath. He shot it and it come tumbling down. Well, when it hit the ground, one of the ranch hands went by and told him, he said, Don Jose, he says, again, ya viniste por el otro. You came for the other one, yeah? Went over to the barn or whatever. Grandpa got the gloves and everything after he put the gun off to the side, wrapped one leg with wire, wrapped it around the pole, wrapped it around the other leg. And so we got this thing about ready, and we're going to look. About that time, the rancher and that same ranch hand come over. And the ranch hand, the owner of the ranch, come right over and told him, he says, I'm glad you got that thing. He says, because now maybe we can get something out of the garden. He says, we haven't been able to get anything out of the garden because the two porcupines have been eating everything. So, okay. So we get back. Well, we looked like two little Aborigines hauling this porcupine on our stick coming over. My great grandpa was even shorter than me. Little short man, 5'1", maybe 5'2".
Wow.
But strong. Was always a very strong man. We get back to the house, and he tells me to get something out and stuff. Then he goes into the shed and he gets out the old gasoline blowtorches that they had that were in the brass containers, that you would see you'd pump up. And he's sitting there, and and you can hear those squills. Pss, pss, pss. They're all popping. Then he takes a stick and he shaves them off once we get all of them off. And I told him, I said, Grandpa, I said, that's just like when we do a pig and stuff to take the hair off the pig and stuff with water, or chicken to pluck the feathers. Yeah, it's just not any different. Oh, okay. So once we had all the quills off, then he was able to gut it open, and he said, now we're going to have some good meat again. But then I remember asking him, I said, Grandpa, I said, when you were sheep herding, I said, how come you wouldn't kill a deer? And he says, too much meat. It would go bad on them. They're always moving. They didn't have refrigeration. So you learn to eat the little things. And he told me, he said, you remember where we killed this one? Yeah. Yeah. He said, well, if you go out to the forest and you see one living in the pine trees up there, it's not going to be near as tasty as this one. He says, because that meat will get the flavor of whatever. He said, it'll be a little harder, a little stronger tasting. But I remember asking Dad and cousins and everything, did Grandpa Joe ever teach you guys about how to skin a porcupine? Nope. No. And it wasn't that they didn't know how, because it probably, but it was just common sense. But an 11-year-old boy to get a chance to learn that, how blessed was I?
What's the Spanish word for porcupine?
Cuerpespín. Body of spines. Cuerpo being body, espín or espina being a spine. Cuerpespín.
Were your grandparents very religious?
Very, in their own right. They loved their church. Didn't mean they had to be didn't have to be at mass every Sunday, but they always prayed. They always prayed. They were always praying, and that's something that all of them, all 5 of my grandparents that I got to know well, including with my Grandpa Joe, they were all very, very dedicated, very faithful to their religion, their upbringing. And when Dad got sick, I had not realized that Dad was actually trilingual. Got to see him one Sunday or Saturday afternoon. We sat down to watch Mass on TV. And he had found an old Mass that was more Latin than anything. And he never missed a beat. Wow. In replying to it. So after losing him, I told my aunt, his sister, I said, I didn't realize that you guys were trilingual. She says, what do you mean trilingual? I said, you guys had English as your second language. Spanish was your first language. I said, but then you had a church language, being Latin. And she said, yeah. She said, we all got to learn going to church, going to Mass in Spanish. And yet, my Grandpa Rivera's mom was more than trilingual. As far as we can figure, she probably spoke 6 languages. English, Spanish, English, the Tegua language from Okeowenga, which is the San Juan Pueblo, where she kind of was raised. She spoke German, she spoke French, and I'm going to say she spoke Latin too. But she was a curandera and a midwife.
Oh, cool.
This little lady I didn't get to know her. Dad grew up spending a lot of time with her. One of my sisters was named after her. Her name was Matilda. And finding out and everything that, yeah, my dad's older brother that he was raised with, my great grandma delivered him, and a year and a half later, he became her grandson. And then she delivered my dad and the rest of the siblings.
Wow.
He was involved in there. Plus, how many more out there? Palma and Encino?
Mm-hmm.
I have no clue. So, yeah, there's remedios and from both sides that I know of and everything that people use, some of them being one and the same, but different things and stuff like that.
Did you ever have any used on as a child?
And I tell this all the time because both my grandmas, my grandma Garcia, my grandma Ursula, my grandma Eva, my grandma Rivera, they had electricity in their houses, okay? But there was still old coal oil lamps throughout the house. And if you ever got a cough, you got to get a tablespoon of coal oil with a teaspoon of sugar.
Oh gosh.
The sugar was to help let that coal oil go down. Coal oil is just clean kerosene. Okay.
Oh gosh.
Grandma and grandpa had it in the store in the dispensary there that people would come in. I remember you'd sit there and you run this crank and fill the container up to pump, and then for every circle, every rotation of the crank back, it was right at almost a quart. Okay. And every one of those, so you counted how many rotations to fill up whatever container they brought you. And I remember the very first time I went to do it, every one of them strokes coming back was a nickel. And I put 7 strokes into a container for a lady there. So for 35 cents, this lady ended up with almost a little over a gallon of coal oil, what they used it. But it was used for everything. Coal oil was used for lots of things. You had a deep gash. It was one of those things that they kind of washed a little bit of it out because it was used as a antiseptic too. But yeah. But
did your dad learn things from his grandmother? Like
I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, I don't remember him talking about a lot of them, but and stuff. But I know a few things. I remember him one time saying that he had a real bad stomach ache and stuff, and I remember him mixing up baking soda and something else, made it and stuff, and put it down. And about 5 minutes later, he give this biggest, loudest, ugliest burp you could have ever heard. He said, "Oh my God!" He said, "I feel better now." But it was, I mean, and if you look at some of the drugs that are out there, yeah, sodium bicarbonate's right there, so it works.
So they didn't have like plants they were growing to use for teas
there was always some kind of plants, aloe vera and a few others. I don't remember what all. My grandma Garcia could make anything grow. I watched her take a potato and make it grow. I watched her take a sweet potato and make it grow. I watched her take an avocado seed and what made it grow too. And it was amazing and stuff. And my mom's youngest brother, my Uncle Jerry, who was almost 4 years older than me, 4 years older. He when he was in college at Highlands in Las Vegas, he had grandma taking care of a marijuana plant for him there at the house. I have never seen a short, stocky marijuana plant grow like that one grew. And talk about beautiful, beautiful plant. A couple of months later, I'd be back in Encino, stopping by to check on grandma after they had sold the bar and the store and everything else. And I go to walk in the door, and oh my God, I could smell the marijuana from outside. Walk in, and Grandma's got the oven turned down low, and she's got cookie sheets and I asked her, I said, "What are you doing, Grandma?" "I'm drying some of this herb that your Uncle Jerry wants, because he says he makes a tea out of it and it helps him with his arthritis. He had a broken arm, and he always complained about arthritis in it." Well, no, he was smoking it, but he wasn't about to tell. And I chewed him up one side and down the other for putting Grandma in that. I don't know if she knew if it was marijuana or not, but for her, it was a tea. She was making an herb out of it, making it a tea for it. But like I say, I've never seen a marijuana plant grow so pretty and so bushy and it was like, holy cow. But she could grow anything. So yeah, there was always something growing in the house. Both houses. My grandma Garcia, Rivera was kind of the same way, but hers was mostly aloe vera and a few other things and stuff. But they all knew. I mean, you had about a bunch. So grandma always had a spearmint outside, and it's still in front of that house. It still grows wild and big old bushy.
Oh wow!
Plants of it. Nobody's lived in that house for 40 years now.
Is that yerba buena? Is that spearmint?
Yeah. Yerba buena. I mean, I remember going and picking it while it was green and just starting chewing it, and it was always so prevalent right there.
So it sounds like all of your family members lived to a ripe old age.
My dad's older brother was 92 when he passed away. Dad was 90. Some of them were younger and stuff. His dad was the last of the boys. The other uncles were in their 80s when they passed away. My aunt is now 84, going on 85. My dad's sister. And then my aunts and the uncle on my mom's side, the oldest one is right now, the oldest of the girls is right now 80 or 81. And my uncle is 74, 75. And my Aunt Annabelle, being the baby of my mom's family, is here next month, well, in May, turned 70. So.
Wow. So, and are they all still in the Encino, Socorro area?
No. I have one of my mom's sister lives here in Lementar, right here where we're at, not very far from where I'm at here. One sister lives in Santa Fe, and the other ones live in Albuquerque, and my uncle lives in Albuquerque. Well, in Los Lunas, outside of Albuquerque. So, and then my aunt, my dad's sister, lives west of Vail, about 35 miles west of Vail, Colorado.
Was Socorro pretty vibrant when you were growing up there?
Yeah, I mean, it was busy and stuff. It's kind of like everything else. We're losing a lot of industry stuff, but we are. But Encino was busy too. I mean, I remember the depot, and I remember things in Encino and stuff. New Mexico Tech is probably the largest employer in the county here for the Socorro area. White Sands Missile Range is probably the next, and then the schools and a few other things are that way. But Tech is the largest employer here in the county. And
so when did things kind of start to slow down in Encino?
Oh, I think it was about 3 or 4 years after the depot shut down. After they pulled the depot, things started and stuff. It wasn't until the early 80s that the school system shut down.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it wasn't in the early 80s when the school system shut down. Because like my aunt and my Uncle Jerry, my Aunt Annabelle, my Uncle Jerry, were in the same class. Why they were he was 2 years older than my aunt. I don't remember and stuff. But they were graduates of Encino High School in 1973. And I remember anytime that, if we had any vacation stuff here, I remember going to school with them, visiting and going with them into classes and stuff in Encino for the day or something. But, and I think it was like 82 or up between 82 and 85 that the last the last years of the school in Encino. And then most of the time, they tried to keep everything within the county, but it was going to be probably 50 miles to get the kids from Encino to keep them in the county to a school, when it was only 18 miles to get them to Vaughn. So the kids now from in and around the Encino area go to school in Vaughn. But yeah.
So when did your family close down their store and the bar and all that?
They sold it to another family right after I graduated high school in 75. So I'm going to say right around 76, where I think I had just started or was getting ready to start going to college at New Mexico State. And it was right before I moved my mom and dad and my family from here to Silver City.
Oh.
So, and then they sold everything, and they'd built a place there in Encino and moved into that. And it wasn't too much after they moved into that I could see my grandma start fading some. She was always such a busy lady, with raising 17 kids, the bar, the store, and everything else. She was the bookkeeper and everything else. And she crocheted, she knitted, she quilted. She was busy all the time. When that lady slept, I have no clue, it seems like. And she ended up developing Alzheimer's and fought with it for a few years before we lost her. And but like I say, she was busy and stuff, but she was an amazing lady and stuff. But I was able, and she was busy. And I tell people, I got to learn a lot through helping mom cook and watching grandma cook, watching both grandma and grandpa and everybody cook. But I tell, like, my Aunt Annabelle and I've talked a bunch about it. I've asked them, I said, do you think grandma liked to cook better than she liked to bake, or did she like to bake better than she liked to cook? And we've all thought about it a little bit. And they said, well, grandma was a fantastic cook. And well, you kind of had to, because having the cafe and everything at one time and stuff and whatnot. And I tell people, I said, you know what? I really don't think, I don't think she liked to cook near as much as she liked to bake. She was an amazing baker. She made some fantastic breads. And stuff, just sweets of all kinds and what. But it was a necessity of life, you know. But all of us all got to learn from her and stuff.
Yeah. Do you do all the cooking in your house?
I tell you that I probably do 95% of it.
Oh, nice.
She tells you that I'm a better cook than she is, but she's a good cook too when she decides she wants to cook. But she'll be the first one to tell you. She says, you don't know how to cook for two people. And I agree. I don't know how to cook for people. I was helping mom for 11 of us. Okay. So if I make something, it's always a big pot or whatever. And she says, well, I guess we're going to eat this for the rest of the week, aren't we? So
sounds good to me. What's your best dish that you make?
Well, I've been complimented on my chilies, that I make good chili, red chili.
Oh, okay.
And I make it more as people tell me it's more a stew, but it's just the way I learned how. It has meat in it. My green chili has tomatoes and meat in the chili. My red chili has just red chili and meat in it. I can never get it to taste like I want without having the meat. I normally use ground beef, but if I use pork or diced pork or diced beef and stuff, and I have made some with chicken, diced up chicken breasts and stuff, and I have a couple of my grandma's old pots, some of the old
cool
cast aluminum pots, and I still use them. And I always say that because of those pots, that's part of the reason. Grandma cooked because she had to, and she cooked for the love of her family. So I think it just trickles down.
Where do you get your actual chilies?
Right here around Limitar,
okay.
San Antonio, to a farmer from Los Lunas. And he's like the third generation. And so her cousins are now fourth cousins, or fourth generation, and then their children are fifth generation farmers and stuff with the chili. They grow chilies left and right. And one of that side of the family's relatives have a place in San Antonio called the Snake Ranch, and they have some fantastic chili there. And then we have Rosales's, we have Bustamantes, we have a lot of people here. This valley right here grows some really, really good chili.
Okay.
The red, starting out with the green and the red. So some of the history part of me and stuff. My grandpa Garcia, he was, being that he had the bar and the store and everything, he was a big politico. Loved his politics. And he got to know a lot of people. Knew a lot of people. And another family that was very prominent in Encino was the Hintons. The Hintons had the newspapers there. They had the printing press with the newspaper. Remember meeting Mr. and Mrs. Hinton and stuff. Grandpa had even rented one of his little properties there in Encino. As you come in on what we called the Y there, as you come in from either Highway 60 or 285, and then Highway 3 comes in, he had a piece of property that was right there. And originally there was a big red barn on it, had a big dirt tank, and the fence was railroad ties that were butted up each other. So there was thousands of railroad ties that were put in a trench and then covered up to make the fence. And a lot of those houses in Encino are made that way. They're made out of what was available to them in the area. We were always going out, we were always doing something, helping families, helping each other. Now, my great grandpa, my grandpa Joe and my grandpa Rivera, being that they had cowboyed and everything else, they worked with all the ranchers, and they were known as the knife men. Okay, they were the ones that did the castrating, the docking of tails, and ear notching and stuff on cattle or whatever it came to be. They were the ones that had the animal husbandry background behind them. If there was an animal that was sick, go find Jose and let's see what he has to say. And so they would go find my great grandpa. They would go get my grandpa Rivera and tell him, unless you're going to use him as a pony, a pony for just kids and stuff, that horse is not going to be good for a ranch anymore. So, put him down or whatever you have to do. But and like I say, I got to know a lot of those old ranchers and stuff, and I still get to see a few of them old. Some of the family, some of the next generation, my dad's generation of these old ranchers that are still around, in and around there, and I've been blessed that they know me and I know them. That they.
Is it still possible for some of the old families to make a living off of their ranches, or do they have other stuff going on?
There's now, because of all the wind turbines that are there, that is the big subsidy that a lot of the ranchers are using to help them get through the times and stuff. Because there's no market left for sheep, so very few people run sheep. Right there in the Encino area, there's only one family that I know of, and they were big time sheep herders and known throughout the Southwest as sheep herders. And it's just the one daughter that she still has a few sheep, but not very many. But she's got cattle on there too. And then the other ones that had sheep were mostly running a few cows and stuff, but they're all let the wind generators come and put on the property. So now I tell people, I've told this all my life. I was born in the thriving metropolis of Encino. People tell me, well, it's a ghost town. You don't know what you're talking about. And I said, yeah. I said, I do. 53 people in the last census in Encino. And I said, go stand on the edge of town and make a circle to look out. And as you make that circle, try counting all the windmills, all those wind generators that you can see. I said, I'll bet you get to at least 1,000. I said, so it's thriving in a different way, in a different direction. But it's a cycle of life. So
yeah. So all change. The only constant is change.
Is it a change for the better or is it a change for the worse? it's a change of the times. It's not any better. It's not any worse, because, you know, there's good and bads with everything. You know, having been raised and lived in Socorro, this area right here, pretty much all my life, and because I do find a grave, I have people say, well, when it comes my time, I'm going back to Encino. Why would you go back to Encino? And I tell them, I said, have you ever been to the cemetery here in Socorro? Well, yeah. I said, it's the ugliest, and it's in the ugly part of town, nothing but rock. I said, I don't like it. Well, there's nothing in Encino. I said, yeah, but that's my dirt. That's my tierra.
What do you do for Find a Grave?
I'm always researching and trying to connect family members with their own families and everything. From it's another form. Find a Grave was not a part of Ancestry for a long time, but they sold to Ancestry, so it's now part of Ancestry. But I've been able to connect, and what got me started with Find a Grave was my great grandma and grandpa are buried there in Encino, but they're buried head to toe in their graves. Well, there's a little marble cross that was between them. It was at grandpa's feet and at grandma's head. And when you looked at it, if you go through a cemetery, you kind of go down rows, this and that, to kind of look and see what you're finding. Well, if you were standing there and you saw grandma's grave, the foot of grandma's grave, you could see her headstone being that cross. It had the information. So if you went down then came back, you would end up putting that cross at your back, and then you would see this other grave, and there was no markings for it. But yet you could tell it was a grave because it looked just like this one, but a lot of people wouldn't. So I kind of thought, you know what, we need to do something with that. And Find a Grave was, how do I get, and it had never been put into Find a Grave. So I put it into Find a Grave. I created the memorial for my great grandpa. And I was trying to get pictures, but I put in a photo request, and the guy took me up before I could get out there to take the photos. And he put it, and he immediately saw what I was talking about. So he got pictures of both sides and everything else. I said, I want to enhance these graves, make them better, nodded and stuff. So, and Dad liked everything. Dad approved of everything and stuff. So we did it. I got it done for him. So it's been things like that we've done. I'm always looking for and stuff. So I have spent a lot of time, and because there are a bunch of veterans buried in the little cemetery in there in Encino, I always take some flags for the veterans, put them in. Last spring, and I was finally able to do it. I told Dad, because we did the same thing for his two uncles out at Palma on my great there. Couldn't find those graves, and I remember seeing them and knowing that they just had little rock monuments and stuff. We made some stones and I was able to get them placed up there so that they're marked. I don't call them headstones because they're not on their graves. They're inside grandma's grave. So they are memorial stones, at least representing that they're there. We had a stone made as a memorial stone, saying, and again in Spanish, saying, for the family of Jose and Antonia Jaramillo. And then we listed the children. May they all rest in peace with the glory of God. And I contacted the parish to find out, what do I need to do how do I go about removing that statue? What is the protocol for not knowing if it was blessed or not? What do we need to do? And finding out, we had researched it. So I had an idea, talked to the priest and everything, and he said, no. Well, the week before we scheduled everything to go put the new memorial stone down, I was over there, and the wind knocked her over, broke her head off.
Oh, no.
Okay, so turn around. I said, well, I know exactly. Put all the pieces back in the body, left it like that. Come back when I got back here to Socorro, got with one of my farmer friends here, and I got a couple of gunny sacks. And I told him what I was going to do with those gunny sacks. And he said, the burlap sacks. And he says, yeah. He said, yeah. His family has always been very religious and everything too. He said, yeah. He said, you bury a religious article like that, like a statue and stuff, and the religion says that if it's blessed, you destroy it. If it can be, you burn it, or you destroy it to where it's unrecognizable. So I said, okay. So we went, before we had everything set up, dug a hole right behind my grandpa Rivera's grave, next to a tree, so that we could take that. So while one of my cousins and my brother are digging the little grave for the statue, I'm getting everything ready. But I took the statue, and right next to my great grandpa Joe is my mom's older brother, my uncle Luis, and he's got a big concrete slab, and I'm at the corner. And I just took it and I started smashing the statue into pulverizing it back down. And my cousins and my cousin and my brother heard me talking. They heard me say it. And I said, "What are you saying?" I said, "I'm telling Uncle Luis not to worry. It's just me knocking on his grave. I'm not trying to get in. I'm just." And Frederick tells me, he said, "You always talk to people?" I said, "Even the dead ones." Well, what does Uncle Luis say? He didn't say a word. He didn't say no, and he didn't say yes. He said just. So I just continued. So anyway, we get done and stuff, and they're like, the next morning we have everybody show up, start painting. We had 75 people there. Okay. From my grandpa, none of his children were there, but his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great. We had 5 generations. We were able to have 5 generations. Had the priest come from Vaughn. He blessed the grave in the cemetery. And then we went back and had a meal. In my grandma Rivera's house in Encino, grandma and grandpa would go to the santuario in Chimayo there. And I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but there's a little hole where you get the Tierra Santa, okay, along with the holy water. Well, in grandma's house, there was little jars everywhere that had dirt, had some of the holy dirt. Well, when Father showed up Saturday morning to do that, I asked Father, I said, "I only have one favor, one request." And he said, "What?" "Would you honor her in using her Tierra Santa and her agua bendita from the santuario?" And he said, "I would be more than happy." And he put his little bottle of holy water in his vest, in his robe. Being able to connect stuff and what family members, and as somebody passes and what, I can connect them to their parents or the siblings or so and stuff. So if you go to find a grave and you know where an individual's buried, you look up that cemetery, you can find it. You can actually find history there. Sometimes there's an obituary there, sometimes there's stuff and whatnot. But being able to find, using Ancestry and using Find a Grave, I have been able to document and find a bunch of information. My great grandma, Antonia, my grandpa Joe's wife, growing up, I had heard that she had died of complications of a goiter. All the pictures we had, yes, she's got her neck covered. Well, I had put it out. One of my cousins, a couple of cousins, which would be my grandma Rivera's first cousins, being that they had done some genealogy and stuff, they said, "Yeah, she died on the operating table." Like, okay, that's more of the information than I've ever heard. So I reached out to one of the other cousins, and I'm not kidding you, in the 5 minutes, having that much information because of her input into Ancestry, whatnot, she found Grandma Antonia's death certificate.
Wow.
Okay. We were playing with it and finally scrolled it up enough. The doctor that was doing her surgery and the doctor that signed her death certificate is the original Dr. Lovelace from Lovelace Hospitals, Medicals. Okay. So, yeah, we've been able to trace, finding these little bits in history of stuff. One of my classmates, his dad was a doctor. He was a doctor here for a little bit. And during the WPA times, he closed up his practice here and became a WPA doctor. He was in Vaughn. Well, one of these great uncles that passed away, he was taking care of. He signed his death certificate. V.E. Franklin. I said, that's Joe's dad. That's Dr. Franklin. That's my classmate's dad. Mm. And it was like, so we're finding, and this was in 1938. Okay. So we're finding that people from here have connections to my family all the way back into 38 and 40 and whatnot. So it's like, it's just been cool to find different little bits in history of stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I hadn't thought about using Find a Grave. That's really cool.
Find a grave is cool. It really is. One of the first things I say is, I don't post anything until I can document it at least twice, whether it be on Ancestry or Find a Grave. And it has to be from 2 different sources pretty much. But yeah, like that little car, the car deal. It's not a big deal, but I've got documentation from 5 of the 6 big individuals in that picture. You know, so it's been fun. It's been cool to do that. I mean, the family history and our families go back a long way.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this. It wasn't too bad, was it?
No. I told you the other day when we saw you in person, and I'll tell you again, there's a lot of people don't understand that there's talkers and speakers. A lot of people can do both. Some people do one a whole lot better than they do the other. Well, I do talking a whole lot better than I do. I hope you got something out of it that you can use.
Yeah.
What I've really loved about all of this, and I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's
very cool.
You know, to be able to say, you know, where do our ties come in? If we go back far enough, we probably do. We probably
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, so, but I thank you.
I've enjoyed myself. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Luminaria. You can reach me at luminariapod@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is of Varsoviana, performed by Nieves Anaya and his daughter Ernestina Anaya at Arroyo Hondo, New Mexico in 1940. It's part of the Juan Bautista Rael collection at the Library of Congress.